Theodore's drum style.
Well, I can see the similarities, but no, it's not. It brings back a lot of nostalgia for me, though. I've played games since, back in the TRS-80 days, the Atari 2600. Had the Vectrex from Sears, which was fairly limited. So a lot of this brings back kind of a feeling of nostalgia, and I think this is one of the reasons. This music's kind of popular in the nerd crowd. As a matter of fact, if you listen to the beginning of the Nerdist podcast with Chris Hardwick, also a Louisville native, the beginning of that has a little chiptune song at the beginning.
Yep.
So, I think for our generation, this kind of hits a nerve, a positive nerve, not a negative nerve, but a positive nerve, positive nerd nerve, that relates to the days of old 8-bit video games. The Tetris, the Mario, the Galaga.
Donkey Kong.
Donkey Kong's a good one.
That's a good one, yeah. Dig Dug.
Yeah. So is the Steel Fins maybe considered playing a little chiptune here and there?
Well, I mean, aside the fact, from the fact that, we're an acoustic duo with steel drums and guitar and none of these other things that would be required for a chiptune.
I mean, maybe throw a Game Boy in there,
Yeah, I mean, I could, I've got, I could just run a, Donkey Kong emulator behind us and just let it run. Mm-hmm. That might help. Just give us another layer there.
I definitely think it's something you should explore, especially with the steel drums. I just feel like it'd be really unexplored territory, and maybe for a reason. maybe we haven't heard this for a reason, but Well,
the steel drums are still a fairly new instrument in the the life of these things. So maybe maybe it's out there.
So these steel drums, I mean, wouldn't they eventually become stolen drums? I mean, they are taken from someone. That's why you call them steel drums, right?
Well, no, if we had taken them from someone, they would be called stolen drums at that point. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we don't steal the drums.
So it's not S-T-A-L.
No, again, you're getting the E's and the A's mixed up. It's two E's.
Okay, S-T-E-E. Okay.
Right, as opposed to E-A.
Okay, E-A-L. Okay.
So, yeah, just to make that clear.
Well, that makes a lot more sense then. I've seen steel drums before, made of steel. I just thought these were stolen. Okay, so...
Well, you can steal steel drums, and then they would be stolen steel drums. They wouldn't be steel drums.
You would steal steel drums.
You could.
But then they would be stolen steel drums.
Right. But they wouldn't be stolen drums. They'd be stolen steel drums.
And they would probably be pawned steel drums, because I can't imagine you'd steal them for your own purposes. Unless, I don't know.
I think you could. There might be a black market out there for steel drums, stolen steel drums, or stolen drums.
We'll check on that.
Yeah,
I'll check the black market and see what the prices run on stolen steel drums.
Yeah, you were going to take a trip to the black market this week anyway, right? Pick some things up, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, take a look.
Some menthol cigarettes. And can I say that? Is that racist if I say that? If I'm going to the black market and picking up menthols?
Yeah, it's a little bit racist. We'll edit that part out.
Remind me to do that.
Okay, yeah, well, definitely. I'll remind you. Definitely edit that out. And just to make it clear, you were the one that said that. So I just want to make it clear. So when you edit it out.
Okay. I'll have you saying it. Can I do that?
You can have me. You can edit it out and have me saying it?
Yeah. That might be better. That way I can have the content, but not be the one to blame.
Sure. This might be a good time to have a guest.
Yeah, right. I've got some outtakes from the Tony interview maybe I can use.
Yeah, just have Tony Acree say it.
Yeah. So I did catch a new podcast this week. Basically, the reason I listened to it was I do listen to Pete Holmes, You Made It Weird, and we'll get into that. But he had two guests on. It was Keith and Chemda from Keith and the Girl, which is a pretty big podcast. I'd heard of it before, but I'd never really given it a shot.
Which one's which? Is Keith the girl or is Keith?
Keith is indeed the girl. Okay. Keith Malley is the girl, and Chemda
is Keith.
Keith.
Okay.
It's pretty simple if you think about it. You can also you'll see it just by the initials KATG. So you may have seen it as that. They are an interesting duo. They do a lot of interviews, with a lot of comedians. And the reason I wanted to listen to them when they were on Pete Holmes, I thought they were very sharp. I mean, they were quick on their feet. Very similar to us. Really similar to us as far as...
Now, would you think I'm more of a Keith or more of the girl?
Turn to the left. All right. That's a tough one.
Well, either way.
Okay, I'm just gonna say either way. Yeah, you could go either way. Keith has a top-rated album on iTunes right now. Actually, it's in the comedy section. It's the first time he's ever done clean material, and watching a clip of it on YouTube for the sale of it looks like that most of the bit is him saying what a hard time he's having doing clean material. And you know how it is. And I've been talking about this a lot recently, actually, in the podcast Reddit subgroup. I've been asking about profanity and if it's a crutch to use in comedy. And I think in some ways it can be. If you're cursing just to curse, then I think you're basically filling that void that, okay, nobody's laughing, let me say some dirty words and just try to shock him into laughing.
Well, that's why Tourette sufferers are such good comedians. I mean, traditionally they are. I mean, because whenever they stop talking, they start blurting out dirty words.
That's an interesting thought. I'd never really considered that. Are you saying that the majority of good comedians have Tourette syndrome? Louis C.K. has Tourette syndrome.
Well, I don't necessarily know if Louis has it, but I mean, I think that most people that have it are just generally funny. I mean, I laugh at them all the time.
Really? Bill Burr, I believe, has Tourette syndrome.
Possibly. Oh, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, that certainly didn't go the way I thought. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really entertained by their podcast, but I want to talk a little bit about Pete a little bit. Yeah. Pete was on, he was also on Comedy Bang Bang that I listened to on Monday, and he's promoting his new show, which is going to be on, when? I think we looked at that.
Yeah, I think it premieres Monday, the 28th of October on TBS at midnight, right after Conan.
Yeah. See, I don't know. I'm kind of getting a little leery of Pete. You know, I like his show, but mostly because I like the people on his show. Pete's driving me a little nuts lately. His laugh is out of control. He's generally kind of coming off a little bit flat, and I don't know if it's because of the show is taking up a lot of his time, but I'm generally thinking that maybe he's someone that just does better with writers, or writing his own jokes and performing them. And he's not maybe all that quick on his feet coming up with some things, because quite honestly, the things I've listened to with him lately has really turned me off. And it's too bad. I've seen his comedic performance. I think it's pretty good. I've seen clips from this new Pete Holmes show, and it's online. You can catch it. It's Professor X firing Wolverine. It's pretty funny. It's a funny bit. I've seen his Batman stuff from College Humor, and I think that's pretty funny. So I think he's got comedic chops, but maybe he's not so good without the writing.
Well, and I think when you listen to his podcast, which you mentioned earlier, You Made It Weird is the name of his podcast. You know, he has some long interviews that get sometimes get pretty in depth and pretty introspective about things. And I think there's definitely some interesting content that comes out of it. But I don't typically laugh at him. For example, the Jason, we were talking about this the other day. The Jason Mantzoukas episode
Right.
was. I mean, we're both big fans of Jason's work. And that was a very entertaining episode of that podcast, because Jason was great.
Right.
Now, at other times, maybe with Keith and the girl, Pete kind of steps on things from time to time, but it's his podcast, no big deal.
Right.
I can live with that. I still listen to it. However, Comedy Bang Bang might be the funniest thing, that I listen to all week. This week, Yeah, it kind of didn't work so well with Pete. I don't know if he really got it.
Yeah. It's just, I don't think improv is his style. Because that show is it has its kind of beginning, which is a little more interviewey, and then it goes into improv.
And we are referring to the podcast,
right?
Just to be clear,
right. Not
the TV show, which is a little bit different type of thing. But in the podcast, typically, you're right. They kind of introduce the guest and kind of get into what they're doing and stuff. And Scott Ackerman's the host, and very funny and great at hosting that show, and just basically cracking me up the entire time when they're talking about what the guest's history and what they're doing now. And then when the character comes in, usually everybody kind of riffs with the character and plays along with it. Pete, I don't think Pete really got it. He kept laughing at the character, and I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of really threw me out of the show, and I was like, it felt to me like even Scott was getting a little bit testy, and not real happy with what was going on.
Yeah, we may be reading into it a little bit, but I know that we're both big fans of that show, and we're big fans of comedy podcasts. So, yeah.
And I don't want to be too hard on Pete, because, my feeling is he's on a lot of stuff. He's got a lot of guests. So my gut is that he's a great guy.
Oh, and he knows his stuff.
He knows his stuff. And he
takes comedy seriously. And what I like about him, and let's talk about what we like about him, is that he understands the effort, the work, the craft of comedy.
Right.
Now, whether or not that comes off in a format like Comedy Bang Bang podcast is a different story, but he knows what it takes to be successful in comedy.
Right.
So I definitely respect him for that. But you're right. It was a few of the things I've listened to him in lately have kind of been a little rough, a little hard to get through.
So I would suggest. Well, I'm not going to suggest you don't listen to Pete. I think you keep listening to him, because he does have great guests, and it's an entertaining show. I think you check out Keith and the Girl. I've found them to be very entertaining, and they've been easy to kind of interact with too, especially Chemda. I made a post on Reddit that was kind of replying to a post that her brother made, and she stepped in and thanked me for listening and was really sincere, and that kind of thing gets me hooked. And I think that's one of the things about podcasts, and one of the things that I wanted to get into it, and I think it's unique about it, is you have a kind of a sense of, closeness to podcast host. It feels a little more intimate than maybe some other formats. People think it's maybe similar to radio, but I think it's a lot more intimate than that. You end up getting in the heads of the hosts and the people that are hosting it. You're a lot more open and free. There's no boundaries, and so that building that kind of relationship, listening to a show, you kind of feel like the people that you're listening to. You feel like you could maybe talk to one of these people on the street and interact with them, even though maybe they're huge comedians. I mean, here we are talking shit about Pete Holmes, who has his own TV show, and we have a podcast with maybe a few 100,000 listeners.
100,000?
Well, that may be stretching it a little bit, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, at least 1 million.
Oh, well, okay. I was going the wrong way with it.
Yeah, well, kind of like the E's and the A's, you'd sometimes move the zeros in the right direction.
Right. The decimal spot was just a little off.
Well, we don't need a decimal spot for the number of listeners, unless you're talking about 1.5 million.
Well, we do have some midget listeners, so...
okay.
Those are they're only counted as 0.5.
Wow. Okay.
So just to be straight, this show I have possibly offended black people, Pete Holmes, and midgets.
Not possibly. You probably... I mean, I think definitely. Definitely. No possibility about it.
Well, the good thing is we can always count on our sponsor, Smitzers, to stand by us. So today, Smitzers brings us, as a product to pitch for them, Smitzers Brazilian Rectal Bleach. when your rusty bullet hole